say I don't easily say that, but Chris and I we've been colleagues at Barco, we've been business partners at GVN, we've even been competitors at Avacor and Philips, but we have been friends over the last 20 years. So Chris, as CEO of i3 Technologies, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Glenn, for the nice introduction.
Well, it's my honor to have you. Really, we've been through a lot together, and in this case, having you on in your new role at i3 is amazing. Perfect for this topic of the week, the future of hybrid education. i3, I'll let you tell the story, but you have tremendous amount of experience in the company that gives you the knowledge to talk about the evolution of hybrid education for over 50 years, this digital transition within the company and within the industry. Why don't you start off and tell us a little bit about that background that makes you so knowledgeable about this topic?
Yeah, well, this is indeed i3 Technology is an interesting case as how a company can reinvent themselves. So i3 Technologies is a spin-off of the mother company, which is Van Arum. And Van Arum started in 1609 as
Wow.
it's already more than 50 years old. It's a Belgian company, by the way. And they started as a distributor in furniture, so tables and chairs for education.
Wow.
Later, a few years afterwards, they started to do their own manufacturing for many years, of course. So they are very entrenched in the Belgium industry on education. They know all the players. And then, of course, some point in time, technology started to pick up in education. And the current owner of the company is quite technical savvy, and he saw an opportunity. And he was also one of the first companies that started in the beginning as a distributor for selling interactive projectors and boards, say, in the industry as a replacement for the chalkboards. And then later on, same story. He said, yeah, well, we can do this better. And he started i3 Technologies about 10 years ago right now. But of course, building a brand is not so easy, as we all know. And it takes like 4 or 5 years before you start rolling. Supply chain needs to get under control. The technology itself was not at the level as it was today. So a real entrepreneurial company. But it's at this point in time, the last 5 years, it started to go quickly and rapidly, more than 30, 40, 50% growth year over year. And today, we are the number 5 in Europe already. And so the revenue of that technology company, which is still, the holding is still consisting of the non-technology and the technology, but the revenue of the non-technology is now smaller than the technology side.
And we keep going. Flipped around.
Yeah, it's actually really a company that turned itself around and reinvented them over the course of 50 years.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's very daring. We both know the story about Kodak and the threat of cannibalizing your business, and you clearly did it. And that is a tremendous challenge, obviously, but also very entrepreneurial.
All credit, of course, goes to the owner of the company, because I'm not 50 years in the company. I'm only like 1 year in the company. And I came in also because the owner wants to grow this company to the next level. And I've been working in big companies like Barco and Philips, learned a lot of, good practices, how to run big companies. And so the intention now is to bring the current company, which is already a grown up, to that next level.
Yeah. So talking about, you have, of course, the experience in the company with people that you talk to. Tell us a little bit about that transition then from digital to then suddenly COVID happens. It's all about the screens and the transition in the classroom, and then suddenly COVID. How have you experienced it as a company?
Yeah. I think we were very well positioned in a lot of companies, to be honest, had a lot of disadvantage of the COVID. Like if you were selling to corporate, most of the corporates were closed. If you were in the hotel industry, as I was in the past in Philips, it was difficult to sell products. But in education, there was something else going on because the governments at that point in time in COVID realized that they were behind in the digitalization in education. And so all over the world popped up some investment plans sponsored by the
Okay,
government, like
I'll take
in
a note of that. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, like in Germany, there's a big initiative going on over the last 2, 3, 4 years. Then Italy has sponsored a lot in education. Spain is now happening. So US is doing a lot investments in education. So the education market itself was funded quite heavily during COVID, and that was a benefit for the company. So you saw a lot of additional investments in interactive screens throughout COVID. In the beginning, of course, the kids were at school, and one of the things that we have at i3, we're quite an agile company, so we saw this opportunity, and we made a tool, LearnHub, which actually we added a special module to do hybrid learning, and so the teachers were able to generate their presentations in that tool and then spread it all over the internet to the kids at school. And what we see today is that this tool is not so much, of course, people still want to, kids still and teachers want to go back to school. That happens, but sometimes there is a situation where part of the team or part of the kids are still at home, and the other part are in the school. So you can use this tool quite easily to facilitate hybrid education.
Yeah, and that's certainly a trend that is not only in education, it's also in corporate, right? Nobody's ever going to be always all at the office again. So from in-room to all at home remote in COVID, now this hybrid reality is almost permanent. I mean, nothing is permanent, but that's really the new reality where it's set down as anything you do has to be in room and remote in this hybrid reality, right?
Correct. So yeah, during COVID, everybody indeed was at home, and then you realize if you're sitting like 8 hours, 10 hours in front of your laptop and doing, let's say, video conferences all the time, that it is annoying. So people want to go back to the office. At the same time, there was also some of these things we were learning how to work efficiently also at work. And so what you see today is that a bit of a hybrid situation is there, where for specific focused tasks you can work in home as good as let's say in the office. But there is a lot of things that you're also missing if you're not in the office.
Yeah.
So people come 2, 3 days a week to the office, and the rest they work from home.
Yeah. So when we said that during COVID, the economic downturn, the governments really were subsidizing education to fund the economy, then everybody was remote. Is there been, as everybody now suddenly was very digital in their work, did you then see another influx of more demand for screens now that people came back to the office? Because now, if you want to communicate with the people at home, you need to upgrade your projector to something interactive as well. So it's almost like a vicious circle or an upward spiral of the supply and demand.
Yes, well, by now the projector is not the technology of choice anymore. It's LCD, of course,
Of course.
because yeah, the prices went down
Yeah.
tremendously. But yeah, well, what I see in the office then specifically is that companies try to make their rooms as efficient as possible. So it's not about a video communication tool anymore. It's a collaboration tool and a video communication tool. It is a multifunctional meeting room,
Yeah.
and you want to make sure that the equipment you bring in fits as good as possible to those various use cases.
Yeah.
So some people, and that's an interesting one. Some people who are in the corporate environment sometimes ask me, "Yeah, why do I need interactive displays?" And then I'm telling them that I understand that the first thing they think about is video conferencing. And in video conferencing, you're at a distance from the screen, so you don't need to be interactive. So I get that. But the fact that the rooms become almost like multi-purpose, so a kind of flex rooms concept is now in place. Then in collaboration, with your software, you need to be at the screen. You need to be participating together at the screen. And so if you want to make a multi-purpose facility, then you need multi-purpose technology. And that's why I think touch is a must-have. Also, think about these days, you have a phone, you have a tablet, you have even in your car, you have a touch display. Everything becomes touch. Even Apple has now finally converted or said that the next generation laptops will also be interactive. So I
Yes.
think the gate is open to interactivity. I touch everywhere. And if you invest these days in screens, I would say for a very small premium, it's much better to go for touch.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I loved the concept when we talked earlier in preparation. The idea of before COVID, people were in the flex desk, and
yeah.
now it's about the flex room or the flex collaboration space. I love that analogy because it also relates to what I talked to earlier with the CEO of Humbly, Anders. Was the change in design of the office. It's not longer sitting at a desk. We go to the office to create value as a team. And so that flex room concept, I think, is very, very insightful, Chris. So thank you for that.
Now, what we also see, Glenn, in education, because your question was actually about education, what we see there, of course, well, they have been using displays for the last few years, but there's still a lot of things we can do to improve, let's say, the efficiency of teachers and how they interact with the students. I think the time where, like in our time, let's say, young time when we were sitting in the classroom, it was a unidirectional information flow from the teacher all the way to the students. Once in a while, yeah, you had to come to the blackboard, but most of the time it was like, here is the information. Just try to get it as much as possible into the heads of the people. What we're now seeing is that it's more like collaborative learning, and trying to find the information for students is much more important than know it everything by heart. So the way they are taught for the, let's say, their future job changes, and there's no better place to also start teaching them as in the classroom as early as possible. So that's where the focus, I think, also for interactive displays for education will go. How can we make the efficiency of a student of a teacher better, and how can we also engage and inspire the students much better in the future?
Yeah, I love that idea, and I think it's a very good point that kids need to learn not only about the material, but also the way of communicating, the way of working together, the handling of the technology. The youngsters are always ahead, but I think it's part of the teachers also to be able to do that. One of the things I wanted to discuss, because we talked about the similarities in education, in the government subsidies and transition to technology. Have you seen, as you now as i3 are growing in Europe, that there's also differences in culture in the educational system, like some Northern versus Europe, German versus UK, how they embrace technology or how they use it?
First of all, I think the technology is more or less the same in the different countries here in the US and so on, but the way they are using it is probably different. I have the impression that in the northern part of Europe, they're more actively using this technology. And in the southern part, they're getting into. Actually, the funding only recently started in Italy and in Spain. So I think they're trying to find their way into that. And in Germany and Belgium and Netherlands and UK and Nordics and so on, they have been embracing that technology much earlier. So they're ahead, you could say, in the learning phase.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
okay. So you can see the trends in the north that will come probably with a little bit of lag in the south as well. So
Yeah.
that's interesting to know that there's also this, I mean, obviously linked to the psychology and the regional differences, that also that in education that has been seen. If
Yeah.
you look at the difference between, and I'm trying to give the people a little bit of perspective in multiple dimensions. We talked about the culture, the deployment. What about the difference in let's say, the levels of education from elementary to high school, maybe to college, maybe to corporate? Are there any significant differences there?
I think there are. I think if you go to, let's say, elementary school, then I see that interactivity is even more important at this point in time than in the middle school and high school. And I think it's probably because if you're using the right tools, you can make some, let's say, very easy and funny, let's say, games or trying and interactive solutions for young kids. They're also used to interactivity with they're into the digital generation, of course, and so there's also more time at that point in time to learn practices, to give them some additional skill sets. There's no less pressure in lower education than in higher education. It's more about getting them the students ready for university and college. And what I still see today is that at that point in time, it's more still a unidirectional information flow.
Okay.
Universities more or less the same presentation mode. My kids are following half of their lessons from home, you could say, or on the browser. Everything is recorded. And I think there is a way to go still in high schools and definitely also in universities to get that interactivity used in a good way.
I'm trying to cope up with your notes. Your good input. The directional. Okay, here we go. Oh, almost. Yeah. So there's indeed a big difference there, and I think that's indeed also interesting for people that are not. And then I can only guess that when you get to the corporate level, because we didn't touch about that. You went from elementary to high school, university. How does that relate to corporate then?
Well, I think in corporate, first of all, I really thought that corporate had embraced the interactive technology more, and I'm actually surprised when I talk to customers that in many cases people are still in the, call it, old-fashioned mode about, okay, we need a screen to project or to show my presentation on a bigger screen than just my laptop. There's so much more you can do in corporate with interactivity. You can annotate, etc., and this automatically notes can be distributed on the attendees. The people still think about the screen for presentation and for video conferencing and collaboration. Oh, that's still a bit on their to-do list.
Yeah.
But I think with the whole concept of flex rooms, I think people will start getting it. And the better you can equip your room for all types of use cases, again, I think the better you make use of your floor space and your square meters. And that's also a trend which is happening in the corporates, in the enterprises. The enterprises are squeezing down their square meters, and they want to optimize that as much as possible. Therefore, flex desks, so part of the force is only available. But I think they should also do the same, and will also do the same in the rooms.
One interesting input, if people say, "Oh, one of the things you mentioned before is like, yeah, everything is going to go interactive anyway, so you'd better, if you buy something new, go interactive now, because that screen lasts 5-7 years, and you might be having an old piece of equipment in 2 years that you can't use anymore." The other one, however, so the ROI is an important one of the ROI and total cost of ownership. Is with interactivity. But for the users, I think one of the key things that we've learned with Aleo in our previous life, we did a research with a big pharmaceutical company, and they are very known for A/B testing with medication, of course. And so they used A/B testing to see what the value would be of interactive presentations and engagement, whether it's hybrid or virtual or in room. And it turned out that people that get an interactive presentation style, multi-directional as you called it, they retain 50% more of the content than people that get pushed unidirectional information. So think about the classrooms. Think about corporate training. If you have 10 people that you pay to sit there and listen, you might as well get the most effectiveness out of that training. So I would say, absolutely to your point, interactivity, dynamic, engaging presentations is more effective. So if you think about talking about the money, that the return there is immediate, right? So 50 more memorization on multi-directional.
I think it's all about the engagement, and the more interactivity there is, you walk back and forth, even physical. You're more into the meeting, I think, rather than sitting in a nice chair and just lay back. Standing meetings, like I think about engineers, software engineers. Every day have a stand-up meeting, 15 minutes. And there's a reason why they do stand-up meetings as well, because you're more focused on the topic. So yes, interactivity allows you to walk back and forth. It's good for your health, and it keeps your mind closer to the topic.
One thing you said, I think, in the preparation as well, I don't know, I think we might have slightly touched it, but I think that's a very important one. When you talked about the education of the teachers, to what extent do you as a company, or do you see the need in the industry to provide training as a service besides just selling the hardware?
It's a good one. I think it's very important to focus on training. We have some trainers in our organization, and their background is being a teacher, and the reason why we have that is because you want to talk the language of your end users, in this case, not the end customers, because sometimes the one who decides the principle is not the one who is using it in most cases. But it's still technology. So there's still, I was talking about the fact that the north of Europe is a bit further ahead in the usage of it. You need to use it on a regular basis to get it into the fingers, let's say. And to get it into the fingers, you need to give people some training. Otherwise, there's like a bit of fear to start working with this, because you don't want to, let's say, have an issue, you could say, in front of kids, which typically are very good with technology. And so what you need to do is you need to have a training at installation, and ideally a repetition of training on a regular basis. The perfect solution, of course, is to get as friendly as possible. And our, let's say, high level goal is definitely to make it as good as like an iPhone. Nobody has a manual and everybody can use it. So that's our real target for the future. But of course, that's not so easy. So in the beginning, I think we still need to give them some training. And we need to also work on the UI and UX to make our performance a bit better. In general, I'm talking about not us, in general as an industry. We can still do some steps forward.
And I think that's ultimately where the interactive business is probably the most intuitive, because we are all tactile beings, right? Before you can read and write, you can touch and feel. And so going to a screen, and you see that with the small kids that go to a magazine and try to flip it, the brain is ready, or is more apt to do interactive stuff with the hands on the screen than it is typing on a keyboard. And so I think it's more, if it's well designed, as you said, then that's more the natural way of doing it.
You can also bring it closer, quicker to the user. If you think about something which is not touch, you have to go into a menu and then drill down and click and drill down and click and so this is not from this world anymore. I mean, the strategy, for example, of Google is always find your what you want in one click. Well, that should also be, I think, the goal of an interactive display. 1 or 2 clicks, you should be there, maybe 2, where you want to be, and you cannot do that in a non-interactive way.
Yeah. Well, let me use that 1 click to go to the Q&A and see if there was anybody that has a question. I think we didn't have questions, so your explanation must have been really, really good, Chris.
Okay.
I don't think there were questions there, but I want to thank you so much for your time and sharing your wisdom with us and with the audience. As always, it was a pleasure spending some time with you. Hopefully next time face to face over a Belgian beer.
Yeah, for sure. And thanks for having me, Glenn.
It was all my pleasure. Thank you, Chris.
All right. Bye.